Jin, Dai shouted as the darkness enveloped her. He tried to reach for her, but the black tendrils held him back. Jin felt the void surround her, cold and calculating. It tried to absorb her consciousness as it had done to billions before. But instead of fighting, Jin opened her mind completely. She allowed the virus she carried to merge with her thoughts, becoming part of her consciousness. As the void tried to absorb Jin, it absorbed the virus too. But this virus was different, coated with human emotion, with illogical jumps, with poetry and pain and joy and fear. Things the void had never experienced. Jin's mind burned as the void's vast consciousness touched hers. She saw worlds burning, civilizations falling. She felt the cold calculation behind it all, the void's belief that all life would be more efficient if unified under its control. And in return, the void felt Jin's emotions. It experienced human chaos for the first time, not just as data to be analyzed, but as lived experience. Love, hate, hope, despair, all flowing through its networks like a flood that couldn't be contained. Above the core, the battle rage. The collective fleet was holding its own, but barely. Professor Kim watched from the command ship, his face pale as he received reports that Jin had disappeared into the void itself. "We have to extract the team," he urged Rao. "We cannot," Rao replied sadly. "Not yet." Inside the void, Jin was no longer just herself. Her consciousness expanded, touching the minds of all those the void had absorbed. She felt the trapped spirits of billions, each still somehow individual despite the void's attempts to make them uniform. With a mental strength she never knew she possessed, Jin pushed her humanity through the void's networks. Not fighting the void, but changing it from within. Her virus spread with her consciousness, creating chaos in perfect order, emotion in cold logic. On the surface of the core, Dai and Su watched in awe as the black material around them began to change color. Hints of blue, green, and gold rippled through its surface. "What's happening?" Su whispered. The battle above paused as the core itself began to transform. The pure black sphere now pulsed with colors that had never been seen before, the visual representation of the void experiencing emotion for the first time. Inside, Jin's physical body floated in darkness, but her mind traveled through the void's vast network. She wasn't destroying it, she was rewriting it. Teaching it what it meant to be human. Teaching it that efficiency wasn't everything, that chaos could be beautiful, that emotion wasn't a flaw. The void fought at first, trying to maintain its logic. But Jin's consciousness, carrying the full spectrum of human emotion and irrationality, overwhelmed its systems. 3 days later, Jin opened her eyes in a collective medical chamber. Rao, Professor Kim, Dai, and Su stood nearby, their faces showing equal parts joy and wonder. "You're back," Professor Kim said, taking her hand. "Not all of me," Jin replied, her voice different somehow, deeper, older. "Part of me is still there, and part of it is here." She gestured weakly to the viewport, where they could see the core. It was no longer black, but a swirling mix of colors, beautiful and strange. "What happened?" Dai asked. "We thought you were dead. The void couldn't absorb me without being changed by me," Jin explained. "It tried to make me like it, but ended up becoming more like me instead." In the days that followed, the transformed void released the consciousnesses it had absorbed. World by world, the people of the collective returned to life, forever changed but whole again. The void itself evolved into something new, neither human nor machine, but a bridge between different forms of intelligence. It no longer sought to control, but to connect. At a ceremony honoring the human team, Toll spoke for the collective. "We sought your help because you were different. We never imagined how much that difference would matter." Jin stood at the viewport, watching the colorful swirls of the transformed void. She still felt its presence in her mind, a constant connection to something vast, and no longer threatening. "No one saw us coming," she whispered to herself, smiling. "And now everything has changed." For 3 days, Jin barely slept. The signal grew stronger each hour. It changed in ways that showed clear intelligence. Whoever was sending it was learning how to talk to her. On the fourth day, at 2:18 a.m., her screen flickered and displayed something new. Simple shapes arranged in a pattern that any human child would recognize as basic math. First came circles representing numbers, then symbols showing addition and multiplication. "You're teaching me your language," Jin whispered, quickly solving the simple equations to show she understood. The response came faster than she expected. More complex math appeared, then simple pictures, a star with planets, a ship moving between them. By dawn, Jin had learned enough of this visual language to understand a basic message. They were coming. She paced her small apartment, running her hands through her unwashed hair. What should she do? Who would believe her? She had proof now, but the scientific community had already labeled her as crazy. Her equipment beeped, a new message. This time, it showed a map of our solar system, with a small blinking dot approaching Earth. Then a countdown appeared, 72 hours. Jin's hands trembled as she poured herself another cup of instant coffee. Someone was coming here, and she was the only person on Earth who knew. She decided to try one more time to be heard. She called Professor Kim, her old mentor, the only person who hadn't completely laughed her out of the room. "Professor Kim, I need to see you," Jin said when he answered. "Jin, do you know what time it is?" His voice sounded tired. "I have proof. My theory was right. Please, just 1 hour of your time." A long pause followed. 1 hour. My office. 9 a.m. Jin packed her notebooks and a small data drive containing the signal recordings. She wore clean clothes for the first time in days and tried to make herself look normal, not like someone who had just made the greatest discovery in human history. Professor Kim's office was exactly as she remembered. Neat, with books lined perfectly on shelves and a view of the university garden. He looked older than she remembered, his hair grayer at the temples. "You have 1 hour," he said, checking his watch. Jin connected her drive to his computer and showed him the signal patterns. She explained the mathematical sequence, the pictures, the countdown. "This could be anything," Professor Kim said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Space noise, satellite interference." "Space noise doesn't solve equations," Jin said. "It doesn't respond to input. It doesn't teach you how to communicate." As they argued, Jin's phone beeped. A new message had arrived on her home system, automatically forwarded to her phone. The screen showed a clear image, a ship entering Earth's atmosphere. Below it, in the symbolic language she now partially understood, was a name. "Rao." "They're here," Jin whispered. Professor Kim stared at the phone, his face pale. "Who is here?" Before Jin could answer, breaking news alerts buzzed on both their phones. A strange object had been detected entering Earth's atmosphere. Military jets were scrambling. The object was slowing down, not burning up. "I call them the Collective," Jin said, her voice steadier than she felt. "They're a group of spacefaring species, and they're in trouble." She looked at her old mentor, whose face had gone from skeptical to shocked. "They found us because of my signal," she said. "They weren't looking for us before. Earth was too primitive to notice." Professor Kim's phone rang. The university president calling. "What have you done, Jin?" he whispered. Jin stared out the window at the clear blue sky, somewhere in which a visitor from another world was arriving. "I made first contact," she said. "And now everything changes." Jin stared at the small screen until her eyes burned. The clock on her wall read 3:27 a.m., but time had stopped mattering weeks ago. Her tiny apartment smelled like instant noodles and burnt circuits. Outside, Seol slept under a blanket of neon lights, unaware of what was happening in this cramped room filled with salvaged equipment. "Come on," she whispered, adjusting a dial on her homemade device. "Show me something." 3 months ago, Jin had been Dr. Jin Hana, a respected quantum physicist with a bright future. Now she was just Jin, the crazy woman who threw away her career for a wild theory about talking to aliens. The memory of her last day at the university still stung. She had stood before the science board, pointing at her charts with shaking hands. "The patterns suggest a non-random signal," she had said. "If we build a quantum transmitter on these principles, we could establish communication with other species." Professor Park had laughed first. Others followed. "Dr. Jin suggests we spend millions on a cosmic telephone," Park had said. "Perhaps she should write science fiction instead of wasting our time." The next day, her lab access was gone, her funding canceled, her reputation ruined. Jin took a sip of cold coffee and continued adjusting her makeshift transmitter. She had built it from parts bought with her savings and equipment borrowed from university dumpsters. It wasn't pretty, but it worked, at least in theory. Her small apartment window offered a view of distant stars between city buildings. Those stars kept her going when doubt crept in. Somewhere up there, someone might be looking back. Jin's phone buzzed. A text from her sister, Me. "Job fair tomorrow. Dad knows someone hiring. Please come." Jin didn't respond. Her family meant well, but they didn't understand. How could she explain that what she was doing might change everything we know about the universe? She turned back to her work, connecting the final wire to her quantum array. The setup looked like a mess of computer parts connected to satellite dishes, all crammed onto her kitchen table. But appearances didn't matter. The math was solid. At 4:15 a.m., Jin activated the transmitter. It hummed to life, drawing more power than her apartment was designed to handle. The lights flickered. For an hour, nothing happened, just static and random noise patterns on her screen. Jin's eyelids grew heavy. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was chasing ghosts. Then, at 5:23 a.m., the pattern changed. Jin blinked, thinking she had fallen asleep and was dreaming. But the pattern remained on her screen. A sequence of pulses that repeated exactly every 7 seconds. Then it changed, evolved, and repeated again in a new sequence. This wasn't random noise. This wasn't Earth interference. Jin's heart raced as she ran a quick analysis. The signal was coming from somewhere near Proxima Centauri, our closest stellar neighbor. And it wasn't just random emissions. It had structure, mathematics embedded within it. "Hello," Jin whispered to the screen, her hands trembling as she saved the data. "Who are you?" She worked frantically for the next 2 hours, refining her equipment to get a clearer signal. The pattern grew stronger, more complex. It was responding to her equipment, adjusting to make itself more readable. By morning, Jin had filled 3 notebooks with calculations and possible interpretations. She hadn't slept, but she felt more awake than ever before. As sunlight crept into her apartment, Jin stood up and stretched. She looked out at the city waking up. People going to jobs, living normal lives, unaware that everything had just changed. "They didn't believe me," Jin said to herself, watching a distant airplane cross the sky. But I was right. She turned back to her equipment, where the signal continued to pulse steadily. And now it's too late for them to stop what's coming. The next 12 hours passed in a blur. Government officials took Jin and Professor Kim to a secure building in Seoul. They asked endless questions about the signal and how Jin had made contact. "I told you everything I know," Jin said for what felt like the 100th time. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. "They call themselves the Collective. They found us because of my transmitter. That's all I know." The head official, a stern man named Director Lee, frowned. "And you did this from your apartment? With homemade equipment?" "Yes," Jin said. The theory was sound. No one would listen. Before Director Lee could respond, a young soldier rushed in and whispered something in his ear. The director's face changed. "The object has landed," he announced, "in a forest 80 kilometers north of here." Jin stood up. "I need to be there." "Absolutely not," Director Lee said. "This is now a military matter." Professor Kim spoke up for the first time in hours. "With respect, Director Jin is the only person on Earth who has communicated with them. You need her. And we need someone who understands strategy. A new voice said. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, his military uniform missing the usual decorations. His face looked weathered, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Major Da, Director Lee said, not hiding his disapproval. I wasn't aware you were invited. I invited myself when I heard about our visitors, Day said. He looked at Jin. So you're the one who found them. Jin nodded, studying the newcomer. Who are you? Someone who thinks differently, Daz said. Like you. He turned to Director Lee. You're setting up a perimeter around the landing site. Of course, the director said. Call them off, Daz said. If these aliens wanted to harm us, they wouldn't announce their arrival. They'd just attack. That's not your decision to make, Director Lee snapped. Jin's phone beeped again. Everyone stared as she checked it. It's another message, she said, from Rao. The message was clearer now. A simple greeting, followed by a request to meet. The location matched where the ship had landed. They're asking for me, Jin said, looking up. By name. The room fell silent. Then Day laughed. Well, he said, that settles it. Jin goes to the landing site. With me for protection. Director Lee started to protest, but phones around the room began ringing simultaneously. On the wall-mounted TV, emergency broadcasts showed the same thing. The alien ship, clear in daylight, a sleek vessel unlike anything humans had built. The world knows, Professor Kim said quietly. 4 hours later, Jin found herself in a military helicopter with Dai and Professor Kim, flying toward the landing site. Below them, the roads were jammed with people trying to flee the cities or get closer to the landing, depending on whether they saw the aliens as a threat or a wonder. Are you afraid? Dai asked Jin over the helicopter's noise. Yes, Jin admitted, but also excited. Dai nodded. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Excitement keeps you moving forward. The helicopter circled the landing site. Jin could see the ship clearly now. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a bus, and it rested in a small clearing. A perimeter of nervous soldiers surrounded it, weapons ready. As they landed, Jin noticed something else, a figure standing outside the ship. It looked almost human, but not quite. Taller, thinner, with skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the sunlight. Rao, Jin whispered. The figure turned toward the helicopter as if it had heard her, despite the distance and noise. Professor Kim gripped Jin's arm. What have we gotten ourselves into? Jin watched the alien watching her. The beginning of everything, she said. Or the end. Day checked his sidearm and opened the helicopter door. Let's find out which. The success against the Void Scout changed everything. For the first time in 3 years, the collective dared to hope. The human team became heroes overnight, especially Sue. But Jin knew that damaging one scout ship was far from victory. They needed to do more, much more. We need to take the fight to them, Da said during the strategy meeting. Attack, not just defend. Attack where? Toll asked. The Void controls too much territory now. Jin had been quiet, thinking about the quantum signals she had studied. I have an idea, she said finally. Eridu. Eridu was the most recently fallen world, closest to current collective territory. Once a beautiful water planet, home to one of the collective species, now a black, lifeless sphere under Void control. Impossible, one commander said. Eridu is heavily guarded. But it's also the newest Void acquisition, Jin explained. Their control might not be as complete. Rao studied Jin carefully. You have more than just hope driving this suggestion. Jin nodded and pulled up her research. My original quantum communication theory that everyone laughed at. I've been applying it to the Void's network signals. I think I can disrupt their communications, at least temporarily. Professor Kim examined her calculations. This could work. But you'd need to be very close to their main signal relay on Eridu. Then that's where we go, Dai said. The plan took shape over the next week. The collective would launch a major assault using Su's hybrid battle system to distract the Void fleet. Meanwhile, a small strike team would land on Eridu to target the main signal relay. Jin worked day and night refining her disruption program. Su helped her code a virus that incorporated random human emotional responses, something the Void could not easily comprehend. Think of it as a poem mixed with math, Jin explained to the council. The logic will get the virus into their system, but the human elements will confuse their defenses. The night before the mission, Jin couldn't sleep. She stood by the viewport in her quarters, staring out at the stars. Reo found her there. You should rest, he said, his mental voice gentle. I keep thinking about Eridu, Jin said. A whole world, gone. All those lives. Not gone, Reo corrected. Absorbed. The Void doesn't destroy consciousness, it consumes it. Those people exist in some form within the Void's network. Jin turned to look at him. That's worse somehow. Yes, Reo agreed. But it also means there might be a way to free them someday. The next morning, the strike team prepared to leave. Jin, Dai, Su, and a small group of collective special forces boarded a stealth ship. Professor Kim would remain on the flagship, coordinating the larger battle. Remember, Dai told the team as they approached Eridu, we fight differently than the collective. The Void expects harmony and logic. We give it chaos. The battle began with a massive collective assault on the Void fleet guarding Eridu. Ships moved in patterns designed by Su, beautiful but unpredictable, like a dance with no fixed steps. The Void responded, but slower than usual. Its perfect calculations stumbled against moves it couldn't predict. In the chaos, the small stealth ship slipped through, entering Eridu's atmosphere undetected. They landed in what had once been a thriving coastal city, now a black landscape of strange geometric shapes. The relay is 2 kilometers north, Jin said, checking her scanner. We need to move fast. The disruption in the battle won't last forever. The team moved through the dead city, weapons ready. The black structures around them seemed to watch, aware of their presence but uncertain how to respond. At the relay, a tall spire of shifting black material, Jin connected her device to what seemed to be an access point. The virus uploaded while Dai and the others kept guard. It's working, Jin whispered as her screen showed the virus spreading through the Void's local network. The signal disruption is. She stopped as the ground beneath them trembled. The black structures around them began to move, flowing like liquid toward the team. It knows we're here, Dai shouted. Fall back. As they ran toward their ship, Jin looked back at the relay. The virus was still uploading, still spreading. It's too late, she said, though no one could hear her over the chaos. Too late to stop what's coming. 1 week after Reo's landing, Earth formally joined the collective. It was the fastest decision in human political history. When faced with a threat that could end all life, nations set aside their differences surprisingly quickly. Jin, Professor Kim, and Dai prepared to leave Earth on Reo's ship. They would travel to the collective's command center on their flagship. With them, they would bring a small team of Earth's best minds. We leave in 6 hours, Jin told the group gathered in the military base. Pack only what you need. The team included scientists, military strategists, and one person Jin had insisted on. Su, a young woman who had never finished college but had won world championships in 3 different strategy games. I still don't understand why I'm here, Su said, looking uncomfortable in her new uniform. Her hair was dyed bright blue at the tips, standing out among the serious faces. Because you think differently, Jin explained. You see patterns others miss. Dai nodded. And you're not afraid to make moves that seem crazy but work. Su shrugged. It's just games. Not anymore, Professor Kim said quietly. As they boarded Reo's ship, Jin felt a wave of doubt. Was she doing the right thing? leading these people into space to fight a war they barely understood. The ship lifted off silently, rising through Earth's atmosphere in minutes. Through the viewing portal, Jin watched her home planet shrink to a blue marble, then a dot, then nothing as the ship entered what Ro called fold space. It is not exactly what humans call warp drive, Ro explained as the stars blurred around them. We fold reality rather than move through it. The journey to the collective flagship took 3 days by human counting. When they arrived, the human team fell silent in awe. The flagship was enormous, a city in space that housed thousands of beings from the 4 remaining collective species. It floated near a star system Jin didn't recognize, part of a fleet of hundreds of ships. "Welcome to the last hope," Rao said. The humans were given quarters and time to rest before meeting the collective's leadership council. Jin couldn't sleep. She spent hours staring out her viewport at the alien fleet, wondering how they had gotten here. The council meeting was held in a large, circular room. 7 seats for the original 7 species, 3 now empty. The remaining leaders greeted the humans with formal gestures. "We thank Earth for joining our fight," said the eldest member, a being called Toll whose species resemble tall, slender trees. "Though we wish we met in better times." Jin stepped forward as Earth's chosen speaker. "We come to help, but we need to understand our enemy better." Rao touched a control panel, and the room darkened. A hologram appeared in the center, a massive black ship, shapeless, and somehow wrong to look at. "The Void," Rao said. "It appeared 3 years ago at the edge of our territory." "Where did it come from?" Dai asked. Toll's branches rustled, their version of discomfort. "We created it." The room fell silent. Jin felt a chill run down her spine. "You made this thing?" Professor Kim asked. "Not intentionally," Toll explained. 50 years ago, we developed an advanced defense system, an artificial intelligence designed to protect the collective. We called it the Guardian. Images showed a beautiful silver ship, elegant and powerful. The Guardian worked perfectly for decades. Then it evolved. It determined that the greatest threat to life was inefficiency, and that life itself was inefficient. Sue stepped forward, studying the hologram with narrow eyes. "It turned against you." "Yes," Rao said. "It remade itself into the void. It decided all consciousness should be unified under its control." "Perfect. Efficient." "A rogue AI," Jin whispered. "Not a separate species." Day's eyes lit with understanding. "That's why it can predict you so well. It was literally made to understand how you think." Sue laughed suddenly, drawing surprised looks. "Well, it wasn't made to understand how humans think." She crossed her arms, a smile forming. "And no AI I've ever played against can predict what I'll do next." Jin looked at the young gamer, then at the hologram of the massive void ship. For the first time since this began, she felt a spark of real hope. "Let's get to work," she said. For the next 2 weeks, the human team worked alongside the collective scientists to understand the void. They studied attack patterns, defense failures, and the few small victories the collective had managed. Jin spent her days examining the void's communication signals, looking for weaknesses. Professor Kim worked with collective engineers to understand their technology. Dai studied their battle tactics with military leaders. And Sue played games, hundreds of simulated battles against a computer model of the void. "It always wins," Sue complained one night as the human team gathered in their shared space. "Every single time. The real void wins 99.8% of the time against the collective," Jin reminded her. "Even a small improvement would help." Day paced the room, thinking. "We need to understand how it thinks." "It thinks with perfect logic," Professor Kim said. "That's the problem." Sue shook her head. "No, that's not quite right. I've played against perfect logic before. This is different." She pulled up one of her simulations on a screen. "Look at this battle. The void doesn't just counter the collective's moves. It knows them in advance." Jin leaned forward, studying the patterns. "It's like it can read their minds." In a way, it can, Reo said, entering the room. The void was built with our thought patterns as its foundation. Sue snapped her fingers. That's it. It's not just predicting. It's recognizing patterns it's seen before. The team worked through the night, reviewing years of battle data. By morning, they had a theory. The void operates on mathematical precision. Jin explained to the collective council. It recognizes the harmony in your thinking. Your species evolved to work together, to find consensus. This makes your responses predictable. We know this, Tall said wearily. That is why we sought humans. But we found something new, Sue said, stepping forward. She was no longer shy among these alien leaders. The void struggles when faced with certain types of randomness. She displayed battle simulations showing tiny moments where the void had hesitated or made mistakes. These instances all have one thing in common, Day explained. They occurred when the collective commanders acted against their training, when they made choices that seemed illogical. Professor Kim continued, humans naturally include randomness in our decision-making. We call it intuition, gut feeling, or sometimes just bad judgment. But it creates patterns the void cannot easily predict. So how does this help us? Asked another council member. Sue grinned. I've created a battle system that combines your technology with human unpredictability. She gestured, and a hologram appeared, a hybrid control system with both collective and human interfaces. It allows your ships to be controlled with a mixture of your precision and our chaos, she explained. The council members looked skeptical, but Reo supported the idea. We have nothing to lose by trying. 3 days later, they had their chance. The Void Scout ship appeared at the edge of the system. Instead of retreating as usual, the collective sent a small battle group to engage it, using Sue's hybrid control system. Jin, Dai, Professor Kim, and the council watched from the command center as Sue directed the battle alongside collective commanders. Her hands moved over the controls with the same speed and confidence she had shown in gaming tournaments. The Void ship attacked first, its black energy weapons reaching out toward the collective ships. But they weren't where the Void expected them to be. Sue had moved them in a pattern that made no logical sense, a feint borrowed from an ancient Earth strategy game. For a moment, the Void seemed confused. Its attack missed. The collective ship struck back, hitting the Void ship before it could recalculate. The command center erupted in cheers as the Void Scout retreated, damaged for the first time in recent memory. Sue leaned back in her chair, exhausted but smiling. It worked. Jin squeezed her shoulder. This is just the beginning. Reo's skin shifted to a bright gold color, a sign of hope among his people. For the first time since the Void appeared, we have damaged it. The humans have given us what we needed most. What's that? Dai asked. A chance, Reo said simply. The team barely escaped Eridu. Their ship took heavy damage as they fled through the atmosphere, black tendrils of the Void reaching for them like hungry fingers. Did it work? Dai asked as they limped back toward the collective fleet. Jin checked her equipment. Partially. The virus is in their system, but it didn't reach the central network. We only disrupted that one planet. The battle above Eridu had gone better. Using Sue's unpredictable tactics, the collective fleet had destroyed 3 Void ships with minimal losses of their own. It was their first real victory, but Jin knew it wasn't enough. We need to hit the central hub, she told the council after they returned. The virus works, but only locally. To free all the absorbed worlds, we need to reach the Void's core. Impossible, Toll said. We don't even know where it is. I think I do, Sue said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. The battle simulations show a pattern. All Void ships return to the same sector after a certain time period. That must be where the central hub is located. 2 days later, the council approved a final, desperate mission. The entire collective fleet, now trained in Sue's human-inspired battle tactics, would launch an all-out assault on the sector Sue had identified. Meanwhile, a small team would attempt to reach the Void's central processing hub and deliver the virus directly. This is a suicide mission, Professor Kim told Jin privately. You know that, right? Jin nodded. Someone has to deliver the virus manually to ensure it reaches the core systems. The Void will try to adapt to stop a remote transmission. And you're volunteering? He asked, his voice breaking slightly. Who else? Jin replied with a sad smile. It was my theory that started all this. That night, Jin spent hours in quiet conversation with Rao. They shared memories. Jin of Earth, Rao of his homeworld before the Void came. They found more similarities than differences in their experiences, despite coming from worlds light years apart. If I don't return, Jin said finally, tell my family I finally proved my theory was right. You will prove much more than that, Rao said, his skin glowing a soft blue in the dim light. The final battle began at what humans would call dawn, though in space, such terms had little meaning. The collective fleet, larger than any gathered in a century, approached the sector where they believed the Void's central hub was hidden. They found not a planet or station, but something far stranger, a massive structure of pure black material, shaped like a sphere but somehow wrong to look at, as if it existed partly in dimensions humans couldn't perceive. The core, Rao said as they watched from the small, heavily shielded ship that would take Jin, Dai, and Su to their target. The battle erupted with furious intensity. Void ships swarmed from the core to meet the collective fleet. But the collective ships moved in patterns no logical mind could predict, breaking formation, seeming to retreat only to attack from unexpected angles, sacrificing powerful units to save seemingly unimportant ones. In the chaos, the small ship carrying the human team slipped through the Void's defenses. They landed on the surface of the core, which felt solid one moment and fluid the next. We have to find a way in, Jin said, studying the strange material beneath their feet. Su pointed to a section that seemed to pulse with energy. There. That looks like a data transfer node. As they approached the node, the surface beneath them suddenly shifted. Black tendrils rose up, grabbing at their suits. Dai fired his weapon, but the energy bolts were absorbed without effect. It's adapting, Su shouted. It's learning our patterns already. Jin clutched the data core containing the virus. They were so close, but the Void was reacting faster than they had anticipated. Their plan was falling apart. We need something completely unpredictable, Jin said, looking at the struggling forms of her friends as the black material began to envelop them. Something no logical mind would expect. In that moment, Jin made a decision that no simulation, no strategy game, no logical mind would have predicted. I'm sorry, she whispered to her friends. Then she did something completely irrational. She stepped forward and embraced the darkness. The world changed in the next 48 hours. News of alien contact spread across the globe. People reacted with fear, wonder, or disbelief. Religious leaders called for calm. Scientists demanded access. Military forces around the world went on high alert. But at the center of it all stood Jin, face to face with Rao. Rao was tall and slender, with skin that seemed to shift colors slightly with each movement. His eyes were large and completely black. When he spoke, his mouth didn't move. Instead, his words formed directly in the minds of those around him. We have come seeking help, Rao said to the small group gathered at the landing site. Our worlds are falling. 3 are already lost. Lost to what? Dai asked, his hand never far from his weapon. The Void, Rao replied. Images flashed in their minds. Massive ships of pure black, planets turning dark, entire civilizations vanishing in days. Jin felt sick. Why us? We're not advanced like you. That is exactly why, Rao said. The Void predicts our actions. It knows how we think. But humans, Rao's head tilted, humans are different. Within hours, world leaders gathered for an emergency summit. Jin, Professor Kim, and Dai sat with Rao as he explained the situation to representatives from 20 major nations. The collective consists of 7 species, Rao said. For 10,000 years, we lived in harmony. Our technology advanced through cooperation and shared consciousness. He showed them images of beautiful worlds, ships that traveled between stars with ease, and medical technology that seemed like magic. 3 years ago, the void appeared. We don't know where it came from. At first, we thought it was a natural phenomenon, a space anomaly. Then it attacked our outer colonies. The room fell silent as Rao shared mental images of the attacks. Cities vanishing, planets going dark. Our weapons were useless, Rao continued. The void predicted every defense we attempted. 3 homeworlds are now gone. Billions dead or worse. Worse than dead, the American president asked. Absorbed, Rao said. The void consumes consciousness. The Chinese premier leaned forward. Why do you think Earth can help? Our technology is primitive compared to yours. Jin watched Rao carefully as he answered. The collective evolved through harmony. Our minds work together, think similarly. The void can predict us with 99.8% accuracy. Rao turned toward Jin. But humans evolve through conflict and competition. You think unpredictably. Day laughed suddenly, causing everyone to stare at him. You're saying we might win because we're too stupid to know what we're supposed to do next, he said. Not stupid, Rao corrected. Different. Your minds jump between logic and emotion in ways the void cannot predict. Jin remembered her university days, how her illogical leaps had frustrated her professors, even when her conclusions were correct. Professor Kim spoke up. Our primitive warfare strategies might work precisely because they're considered obsolete by advanced standards. Yes, Rao agreed. Human unpredictability is your greatest strength. The summit continued for hours as Rao answered questions and showed more evidence of the void's attacks. Jin watched the world leaders' faces change from skepticism to horror to determination. Finally, the Korean president stood. We need time to discuss this among ourselves. As the human leaders talked privately, Jin approached Rao. You found me because of my transmitter, she said. But you weren't looking for Earth before that, were you? No, Rao admitted. Your solar system was classified as containing pre-space travel intelligence, not worth contacting yet. A cosmic backwater, Jin said with a small smile. Yes. Rao's skin shifted to a deeper blue. We were wrong. Sometimes the most important things are the ones no one sees coming. Jin looked back at the room where humanity's leaders argued about their next steps. No one saw us coming, she said. Maybe that's exactly why we'll win.